Good morning, welcome, and thank you for joining my second roundtable in our series about childhood cancer. The Gabriella Miller Kids First Act 2.0 is the first bill that I introduced in the 117th Congress. The bipartisan legislation would provide new sources of funding for childhood cancer and disease research. If passed, it would be a historic investment showing just how seriously the federal government takes tackling this issue. I'm proud to carry this legislation in Gabriella Miller's honor, whose passionate advocacy changed the lives of countless other young children battling these illnesses. We had our first roundtable in this series on January 26th, and in the short 73 days since then, it's estimated that at least 3,358 children have been diagnosed with cancer, and at least 511 children have died in the United States alone. That's a terrifying statistic, and we need to do something about it. And that's why it was important for me to have a Faces of Childhood Cancer roundtable, because the name of this bill is the Gabriella Miller Kids First Research Act 2.0. Children with cancer or other diseases often don't have the ability to share their experiences, thoughts, and needs. So I wanted to provide that platform for some amazing kids to tell us their reality and what they want the public to know about children with cancer. Now I'm going to toss it over to my constituent, Ellen Miller, who has done amazing work through her nonprofit, Smashing Walnuts, and her advocacy for Gabriella and for all children. As a mom, I can never comprehend the pain that you have endured through losing a child to cancer, and I want to thank you for allowing me to carry this important legislation in Gabriella's honor. Ellen, all yours.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman. It has really been an honor and a pleasure working with you. So you briefly mentioned about the legislation that we're working on now, and that it's a 2.0 version. And so Gabriella was 9 years old when she was diagnosed with terminal brain cancer. And from diagnosis until she passed, we had exactly 11 and a half months. And 2 weeks before Gabriella died, she was interviewed by a childhood cancer awareness organization called the Truth 365. And it was at the time back in 2013 of sequestration. So government shut down, and Gabriella was on a chemotherapy that needed the FDA to look at it, and they were closed. So we were scrambling to look for a new drug. And the interviewer, Mike, asked Gabriella if you could say anything to our elected officials, what would you say? And Gabriella said, stop talking, start doing. And that clip led to the original legislation. And so with that original piece of legislation, it proposed to move $126 million over to NIH for childhood cancer and disease research. And so far, we've successfully gotten 7 consecutive years funded, over $88 million, but it sunsets soon. And what was really fantastic working with you, Congresswoman, is I knew you on a state level. And as soon as you got into office, I came knocking on your door and said, please help. And you were the one who provided the original source of funding for this new bill. You said, vet this with existing penalties against pharmaceuticals that break the law. And so what we love so much is that you, as our elected official, you don't need to find the money anywhere. You don't need to appropriate it. It doesn't cost us taxpayers a penny. And it's just such a win-win situation. And so excited to work for and with you to get this new piece of legislation passed. So thank you.
Thank you, Ellen. And that's one of the great things about the legislation is that it wouldn't cost the taxpayers a dime. It uses existing funding sources, and it turns bad actors' penalties against them into something that would be good. And it would provide sustained funding for this research, which is so important, rather than having to not know from year to year whether the funding will be coming for this life-saving research. Now I want to hand it over to our kids to introduce themselves and just talk a little bit about their journeys, their diagnosis, their treatment options, and what they've dealt with dealing with this terrible disease. Grace, let's start with you.
Hi, so my name is Grace Eline, and I'm currently 12 years old. So at my age of diagnosis, I was 9 years old, and I was diagnosed with germinoma, which is a germ cell brain tumor, and my tumor was found in my pituitary gland in my brain. And as of right now, I am currently cancer-free, which I am so grateful and thankful for.
Thank you so much, Grace. And Cole, how about you?
Hello, my name is Cole Eicher, and I am currently 19 years old. and a freshman at the University of South Florida, St. Petersburg campus. I was diagnosed at age 12 with a brain cancer called medulloblastoma, and I am currently showing no evidence of disease, also called NED.
That's wonderful. I love good news. Megan, if you would tell everybody a little bit about yourself and your diagnosis and what we've been doing.
Yeah. Hi, my name is Megan Bug, and when I was 13 years old, I was diagnosed with stage 4 alveolar rhabdomyosarcoma, which is a soft tissue muscle cancer. The original tumor was found in my arm, but the cancer was everywhere in my body. I am now 19, going through my 4th relapse. In total, I've gone through 131 weeks of chemo and 197 rounds of radiation. Currently, I don't know where I stand, if I'm cancer free or not. I just finished up radiation and I will have scans again in May.
Thank you for sharing, Megan. Hannah, how about you?
Hi, my name is Hannah Adams, and I'm a 17-year-old high school senior from Birmingham, Alabama. And when I was 5.5 years old, I was diagnosed with stage 3 nephroblastoma, which meant that a softball-sized cancerous tumor was enveloping my left kidney. But I've been cancer-free for 11 years now, and I was trying to make a difference.
Thank you so much for sharing. And Kellen, tell us a little bit about what your diagnosis is and what your treatments have been.
Okay, so hi, my name is Kellen McLean. I was diagnosed with acute myeloid leukemia, or AML, which is a rare and aggressive blood cancer when I was 15. Since then, I've relapsed twice, had 1 bone marrow transplant for BMT, and 1 peripheral stem cell blood transplant with an additional resolved T-cell infusion. Now I'm 19 years old, and I'm thankful for this opportunity to share how childhood cancer has impacted me and my family and be a voice for all kids with cancer.
Thank you so much, Kellen. Now, Grace, I thought you looked familiar. You were one of the presidential guests for the State of the Union in 2019, weren't you?
Yes, I was.
And so that must have been pretty exciting, but a little bit scary too, I'm sure.
Yes, it was. I mean, getting to represent this cause at a national level, I mean, it was so exciting, but of course I was kind of scared to be in front of everybody, but I mean, it was such an honor to represent the cause.
Yep, no, it was great seeing you stand up and everybody stand up and applaud for you and for kids who are dealing with cancer and for the federal government's funding the research. But we need to make it sustainable, and that's why I want this bill to pass so much. So now if you guys can talk a little bit about some of the treatments that you've had and what you've had to do to get in. I know some of you have been able to participate in clinical trials and others of you haven't. So if you want to talk a little bit about that, let's start with you, Hannah.
So my treatment included, I was diagnosed in May of 2009. And within the first week, I was receiving a PICC line, doing scans, and starting chemotherapy. And so for the chemotherapy, they had to shrink the softball-sized tumor that was enveloping my kidney. And once it was shrinked enough, I had surgery. And so originally they believed in the surgery that they would have to remove my entire spleen, part of my stomach, part of my diaphragm, and of course the tumor in my kidney. But once they got into surgery, they realized that they only had to remove a nickel-sized part of my diaphragm, my left kidney, and the tumor, counter to what the scans had shown. And after surgery, I had more radiation treatment and more chemotherapy, but I was finally declared cancer-free in November of 2019. So it was a short treatment process, but it was super rigorous and difficult. But what I found so interesting is that the drugs that I was treated with in 2009 were the same drugs that had been developed 30 years earlier. And now if someone's diagnosed with stage 3 nephroblastoma, now they would be treated with 40-year-old drugs. And as a result of the harsh treatments, I now have stage 1 kidney disease that I have to deal with, and we have to watch my heart extra closely, but I've remained cancer-free.
Well, that's great news, but I know that the chemo and the radiation are so hard on you guys, and you know, a lot of the cancer treatments that we have are designed to attack fast-growing cells, and for kids and young people, all your cells are fast-growing, so it's really extra hard on you guys, which is why we need special treatments that are targeted just for young people and just for kids. So thank you so much. Megan, if you can tell us a little bit about the treatments that you've had to deal with over the course of your cancer diagnosis.
Yeah, so when I was first diagnosed, I went through the original standard 54-week treatment, and I did that 54 weeks of chemotherapy and radiation. I was cancer free for about a year, and then I relapsed. And for my first relapse, I was given a 36-week standard relapse protocol. When I relapsed for the third time, there were no more clinically proven treatment options. So I had to do an experimental chemo combo that was supposed to last around 36 weeks, but got cut down to 24 weeks due to the damage in my lungs. I wasn't able to walk to the bathroom without feeling like I was gasping for air. I could not breathe at all. It was a really scary situation. So I had to stop the chemo, unfortunately. For my fourth and current relapse, I am now on another experimental drug that's actually a breast cancer drug that they found might work in sarcomas. When you get to the relapse point, it's always the might work. It's never this is going to work. And so far, I have finished 6 rounds, which is 18 weeks of this chemotherapy. And if I were to relapse again, it would come down to clinical trials, which are not FDA approved, and they don't know the success rate or the side effects of those. After my second relapse, I started to feel almost like a lab rat for researchers. You know, they were using me to see if these drugs worked or not. Proton radiation continues to be the only clinically proven treatment option that has worked for me.
And do you talk with your parents about whether you're going to participate in these new rounds of treatment and things like that? I mean, how do you make that decision? It's got to be so tough.
It is tough, but I've always told my parents and told myself that I'm going to do whatever it takes to get cancer free. I've come so far. It's been 6 years, and I will try any drug. I will go anywhere in the world to get that drug that I need to become cancer free and to continue to be a voice for children.
That's wonderful. I love your determination. And it's interesting because, you know, they're taking these drugs that are designed, or treatments that are designed for breast cancer, and kind of trying to retrofit them for kids and for different cancers. And it's just, you know, an indication of they have all these options in breast cancer because they have so much funding for the research. And there's just so many more options, and it would be good to have more options for kids and for the cancers that you guys are having to deal with, the rare ones and rare diseases as well. Kellen, tell us a little bit about your diagnosis and what you've been doing treatment wise.
All right. Well, when I was first diagnosed, my doctors wanted to start chemo right away because I had more than 90% of my bone marrow was leukemia blasts. So they started chemo right away, and from the overwhelming shock and tumor lysis, my body completely shut down. I had to be intubated, and I had kidney failure. One of my lungs collapsed. All sorts of things were going on, and I was living off of all these machines. Eventually, I woke up, and I was able to finish out the rounds of chemo. So for AML, it's all inpatient, and we get very intense and aggressive IV chemo treatments inpatient, and each round lasts about a month. And if you recover soon enough, then you can get to go home for a couple days, maybe even a week in between rounds. I wasn't able to do that at first, but eventually I was able to go home in between, and I finished my 8.5 rounds of chemo, and I was declared, cancer free. Everything was great for about a year. I spent that year, recovering, going to appointments to just double check, make sure everything was going great. And then we found out a year later that the cancer was back, and at that point, the protocol is to have a bone marrow transplant so that I'm no longer making my own blood. The donor bone marrow would be making my blood, so there would be less of a chance of cancer happening. So that required a lot of chemo and cranial and full body radiation to get rid of the cancer. And then they had to sort of break me down with some medicines to condition my body to accept the new matter so that I wouldn't kill it off. And that was really brutal and rough, but the transplant was successful. I was able to get a full match and things were going great. For the most part, it went according to plan and it worked. But it only worked for 19 months. After that, we found out that there was a little bit of my bone marrow left that was making cells again, and they weren't good ones. So at that point, there isn't really a set protocol for AML after a failed bone marrow transplant. So we worked with my doctors and looked into different trials that were available. And while we were doing that, they just wanted to get rid of the cancer so that once we found a trial that I was eligible for and seemed promising, we could start right away. And we did. So the resolve cells are an extra donation from my donor that have been sort of trained up by the doctors to target leukemia cells. And I got another bone marrow transplant with these cells in addition, and it's not a full match. This time they wanted to have some graft versus host disease, hoping that it would cause some graft versus leukemia effect. And right now I'm recovering from the transplant, and I received the resolved cells a few weeks ago. Right now it's working, but if things don't work out after this, I'm just going to have to see what new trials and drugs are available at that time. Because we're just kind of trying.
Yeah. No, thank you so much for sharing, Kellen. And it must be horrible to go through all that and then have the cancer return. So I'm thinking about you. I really, really hope that it takes this time. It sounds like, I mean, it's wonderful that you have this relationship with this donor who wants you to succeed as well, and your physician. So wonderful. Thank you for sharing. Cole, if you could talk a little bit about what you've done in terms of treatments and what's going on with you.
Absolutely. My protocol for brain cancer underwent surgery, 30 rounds of radiation, and 4 months of intensive chemotherapy. But 1 year after my treatment was done and I was still declared NED at that time, my doctor did share with me that I had a rare gene mutation that would cause colon cancer at the time that I was in high school. There was no treatment options available for me at that time. The only option was to remove my colon. And so I went through the removal of my colon, but it was very shocking to me because if I was 18 or older, I could have more options to fight back against my colon cancer. But then also I could slow the growth of my polyps as well. So just because of my age, surgery was the only option available for me.
That shouldn't be. I mean, that just, the difference of a couple months or a couple, like 18 months or whatever was the difference, shouldn't be the difference between having to have something so drastic as having your colon removed and having to have treatment options. So thank you for sharing, Cole. And Grace, tell us a little bit about what kind of treatments that you have had to deal with.
Sure. So we found my tumor in April of 2018, and we were not expecting it to be a tumor. My endocrinologist actually thought it was going to be diabetes insipidus, which is a side effect of the tumor. So we went directly to different tests. I went through MRIs and scans and blood work. And then when we finally discovered what my tumor was, it was germinoma. And the typical protocol for that is to do like a biopsy, but we ended up not doing the biopsy. And we went immediately to chemo because the location of my tumor was pressing up against my optic nerve. And thankfully, I did not have any damage. But had we waited 3 months in order to start treatment, I would have been completely blind. So we went to chemo, and I had 4 rounds of chemotherapy. And the goal of the chemo was to shrink my tumor. And then I ended up having proton radiation, and it had to be very steady because of the location of my tumor. And that worked, which I'm so thankful for, and my tumor was gone. And they went through a few tests, and I was declared NED, nodes of disease. And I mean, I'm so grateful that I did not have any major side effects. I still have minor side effects, but I'm still allowed to do my normal everyday things, which I'm so grateful for.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. And NED are now, I think, the best letters in the world. I mean, hearing NED is probably the best thing you guys ever hear. So anyway, Ellen, do you have any questions for our panelists? I know you do.
I do. A question for you with regards to your friendships. I know that when Gabriella was diagnosed, she was 9 and very conscientious of wanting to be exactly like her friends and didn't want to be any different. And so we made a point of going to all of our classmates and sharing with them that she had cancer and what she was going to go through, and asked for their support. And I have to just say that they rallied around her. And it got to one point where like they wouldn't let her carry her books, anything, and she actually cried that they were too nice. And I thought, oh, what a good problem to have. But not everybody has that experience. So my question for all of you is, how has your cancer diagnosis changed your friendships? Have you lost friends that you had before cancer, and then since your cancer diagnosis, new friends that you've made? Have you lost friends to cancer as well? And so, Grace, would you answer that first, please?
Sure. So like Gabriella, I did have access to somebody who would go and talk to my class about what I was going through, which I mean, I'm immensely grateful for that. And the majority of my friends were supportive. I mean, they were accepting if I couldn't maybe go play on the playground with them because my endurance was just too low for my treatments. But at the same time, I also had some friends who weren't exactly as supportive. I mean, I could understand what it must be like to have like that scared feeling of having a friend with cancer, because I mean, it must be pretty scary. But I made up for that because during my treatment at my center and after my treatment, I made many friends who also had cancer and were in survivorship stage, which I was so grateful. But unfortunately, some of the friends that I made due to fighting cancer, they passed away, which I was so sad. But I am now even more determined. It is just a determining force for me just to keep up their legacy and just honor them, because now I'm so passionate for this cause and just making the world a better place, and just to honor them.
Exactly. Thank you. Cole, will you share next, please?
Absolutely. Friends come and go. I will say that. Before my brain cancer, I had great friends, and some of them, couldn't bear what I was going through. And you find your true friends out of big experiences in your life, what you're going through. But I will say that I have amazing friends all around me to support me, my family as well. But the biggest trend that I'm probably going to hear from all of you guys is how lost friends are made. It's very devastating. I have so many friends that have lost their lives to childhood cancer, and it is just, I can't get over it. But they are definitely in my heart. That's the one biggest reason why I am doing this, just to make a change, a difference in the lives of kids with cancer.
Exactly. One thing that Gabriella said, that if there was one good thing that came out of cancer, it was all of the new friends that she made. Kellen, will you share next, please?
Yes, of course. Yeah, I think like a lot of other people, I've lost tons of friends, especially through like having cancer 3 times. I can count on one hand the number of people that have, aside from my immediate family, that have like really stuck by me through all of it. Like some stayed, the first time, and then when I came back, I felt really distant from them because they had grown closer without me. But then when the cancer came back again, like they were gone, just like the life I used to have. And I have made a lot of new friends, like all of these guys here, since being diagnosed with cancer. And I've also lost a lot of friends that to cancer. And it's really terribly sad because like they're so young, and it's scary that like they're my age. That could have been me. And like they also should have had a better fighting chance, and they shouldn't have suffered and endured what they did before they died. The treatment is just so brutal. It breaks people down.
It's devastating. It's devastating to go through it yourself and come out on the other end and know that you've got somebody who is just right next to you that's not there with you anymore. Hannah, will you share next, please?
Yes, of course. So I always like to say that cancer, it greatly impacts the individual who's diagnosed, but it impacts every single person around the person who's actually diagnosed, their friends, their family. And I was 5.5 years old, so I was still going to dance class. I was still going to school, and it was difficult because I wasn't able to do those things anymore, and I wasn't able to go play with my friends all the time. But we had similar conversations. We explained, okay, Hannah's hair is going to fall out. She's going to look a little different than she has in the past. She's not going to be able to have as much energy. She may miss some dance recitals, but I was fortunate enough to have such an awesome community around me that really rallied around my fight and around this cause. And I was treated in Houston, Texas, and I made a lot of friends there, and I've remained in touch with them now, even though that I've moved. And I think that you make the truest friends when you're going through something like that. And now being on the other side of things, I unfortunately have lost a lot of friends who passed away to pediatric cancer. I'll never forget, I think it was like a month after I'd been declared cancer free, and a little girl that I become friends with, her name was Lainey. She was being treated at MD Anderson as well in Houston. And I found out that Lainey had passed away. And my heart sank instantly. And I realized, okay, that could have been me. We were that close. We were good friends throughout that time. And I've unfortunately had so many other instances like that. But that just motivates me to find better treatments, to find better cures, and to help other kids who are going through this fight.
Exactly. That just reminds me of the interview that Gabriella had. And she said that if I die, if I go, I know that others will join this fight and fight in our honor. And that's what you all are doing. So thank you for that. Megan, will you share now, please?
Yeah. So when I was first diagnosed with alveolar rhabdomyosarcoma, I was in 8th grade. It was a really tough time to be diagnosed because I was just about to go into high school, and I had to completely miss my whole freshman year, which made sophomore year even more difficult. At first, everyone was super supportive. My classmates, my friends, everyone was very supportive. Until I kept relapsing, I noticed that they lost interest in my battle a bit and kind of just thought, hey, this is her normal. This is just what she goes through all the time. And I've noticed that people started to distance from me. I actually lost one of my best friends during my battle. But something I'm grateful for, and I've realized, is that the truest friends you make are the ones who have gone through the same thing as you. They understand you, they understand what you're going through, And having those people to talk to has just changed the world for me. Some of my closest friends are childhood cancer fighters. And about a month ago, I did lose my best friend to childhood cancer very unexpectedly. And it's one of the most heartbreaking experiences. It never gets easier. But like Grace and Cole said, it makes you want to fight harder. We have to find a cure. It empowers me to fight for my friends and these kids who have lost their lives. It's tragic. We as a country have failed them, and I will do everything it takes to make sure no child has to go through what they go through.
That's exactly what Gabriella wanted to do as well. And that's, you are all so powerful with sharing your stories that way. You're right, we as a society have failed our kids with cancer, and it's coming together like this and having a leader like Congresswoman Wexton that's taking up our cause that will help make a difference. So thank you all so much.
No, and I can't do it without you guys, and hearing your stories is so touching and so moving, and I'm so inspired by all of you and your fight and everything that you're doing to help other kids. And you're right, Megan, I feel that we as a country have failed your friends, and we need to do better. And that's what I'm hoping we'll be able to do with this legislation. But we have an opportunity you guys have a chance because you have this platform. I hope that you'll share what you want to, if you could say anything or what the words that you would like to express to any adults and elected leaders about kids with cancer and what we need to do. And before we do that, if you don't mind, Ellen, we're going to share a little bit from Gabriella and what her great advice was. So Justin, can you play that video, please?
I need my childhood, and less and less kids are gonna have their childhood if people don't raise awareness and raise funds.
So what message do you have to our political leaders, our elected leaders, about kids like you?
Stop talking and start doing. And I'm gonna say it right now. Do whatever you want with this. But I just have to say it. Talk is bullshit. We need actions. and oh my gosh. Oh my God, you're making me cry. You were already crying. I'm making you laugh. But, stop talking, start doing.
Look where she was. Oh, actually, we'll wait here. Come
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Wow. Yeah, I did kind of go from crying to laughing, back to crying again. So, guys, you guys are much more effective than we can ever be. So, starting with you, Megan, what is your message to adults and elected leaders when it comes to kids with cancer and what we need to do?
I would say the main thing is just start caring. Notice that there are children going through this. There's children dying every day. We always say we would, as parents, my parents always said we'd do anything for our kids. We do anything. Why aren't we doing everything that we can for the children who are fighting cancer. Shouldn't kids come first? We're spending so much money and so much research on cancers that people get when they're 70 years old, like prostate cancer, and who are losing about 10 years of life. And, you know, with childhood cancer, the average age you get diagnosed is 6 years old, meaning you're losing close to 70 years of life. My hope is that we start to make a change and realize that kids are worth more than 3.8% of funding, and it's time to get new treatments going because doctors have the research. Doctors have new cures. They have new drugs. They just need the money. And if we would all just start caring, we could make a really big difference in kids fighting childhood cancer.
Thank you, Megan. That's wonderful. I couldn't have said it better myself. Hannah, how about you? What did you like to tell our elected leaders?
Something that I think is unique and incredible about the pediatric cancer cause is that it is such a bipartisan issue. It's not a Democrat or Republican issue. It's not a religious issue. It's not a socioeconomic issue. It's an American issue. It's a human issue. And these are the most vulnerable people in America. These are the people that are just starting their lives, and they deserve the opportunity to live a life. And I believe that from passing important legislation, that's the only way we're going to have more funding for research to ultimately find better treatments and cures for these kids. Over the past 30 years, only 4 new pediatric cancer drugs have been approved by the FDA compared to 165 for adults. 4 to 165. That's crazy. And we have specific treatments for other diseases and illnesses between children and adults. So why don't we have something for kids? And over the past 100 years, we've seen treatments and cures be found for typhoid, yellow fever, polio, measles, and even most recently, the COVID-19 vaccine. And that's incredible to see what technology and science has the capabilities of doing now in the 21st century. So why aren't we focusing on these kids? Why aren't we giving them the opportunity to live a life? And so that's my message to our elected officials and anybody watching, is that let's find better drugs that are going to have less toxic treatment options so no child will ever have to be diagnosed with cancer again.
Thank you so much, Hannah. And that's a really, really good point, that cancer doesn't discriminate. You know, it attacks just about anybody. And you know, you guys are coming to us today from Alabama, from Florida, from Illinois, from New Jersey, and from right here in Virginia 10. So all around the country, this is something that affects everybody's constituents. So you're absolutely right. It is a bipartisan issue, and it's time for us to stop talking and start doing. Thank you. Kellen, what would you like to share?
Well, I just want to say that, like, it's not over once we finish treatment or our hair starts to grow back and we're in remission or NED. That's fantastic, but these old drugs that they're using to fight the cancer are derived from mustard gas. They're like destroying our bodies. Like Hannah said, she has stage 1 kidney disease from the treatment. Kids lose limbs. They have multiple organ failure, heart problems for the rest of their life. And these are things that they have to cope and deal with as they grow up through everything they do in life. They need like 504 plans to help them accommodate like their cognitive defects from treatment. And they have to graduate high school and go to college and try to start a family when they've had treatment that's caused them to become infertile, or their bones break very easily because of the steroids and other medications we're given. It's just a hard life. Even after you're cancer free, the side effects left over from the treatment, they stick with you forever. So if we could put more research into developing better drugs that worked for more kids and allowed us to live fuller, higher quality lives, that would be great.
That's an excellent point, Kellen, and that's one of the things that was brought up in our earlier roundtable. That scientists and researchers, they have the tools now with genetic sequencing and mapping, and being able to use AI to be able to determine what kind of targeted treatments work for which various strains of cancer, and they just need the resources to be able to to come up with better targeted medications. So yeah, they've made great strides, but they need resources, and you're absolutely right. Thank you. Cole, what would you like to share with all the adults and elected leaders?
I wish that the general public would really know that any kid could be diagnosed with cancer. I can speak on all of us that we were perfectly healthy before we were diagnosed with cancer. Also, that I would think that the number one disease killer is cancer, and it's killing children. And I would think that this is an important news story that would be on the news. If you consider just right now that every week over 200 children are diagnosed with cancer. This is equal to 5 school buses of children that are being diagnosed every week. It is a devastating thing that would be 5 school buses every week. And I would just think that why would that not be on national news on a story? Children with cancer rarely appears on national television, and when it does, it doesn't share the true urgency of the situation. Now that all children are getting better, I would understand. But since 1 in 5 are dying, that is 1 full school bus every week. These kids do not have what they need to fight back against this cancer. And, someone age should not determine whether they live or die. Kids deserve more options just to fight back. And I just want to thank you for the attention to this matter.
Thank you, Cole. Grace, what would you like to share with our elected leaders and adults about kids with cancer?
I think that it is important for adults and our elected officials to remember that children are not adults. Our bodies are different. Because when I would get sick, because I'm 12 years old, when I get sick, my mom would treat me with children's medicine that's specifically made for me, not a medicine that she would use to treat herself as an adult. But when I went to the hospital for my cancer treatment, I was treated with drugs that are used for adult cancers. Kids are being treated with drugs that are made for adult bodies. And some of these drugs that we are being treated with were designed as much as 50 years ago. So not only are they for adults, but they're also outdated. And like Hannah said, in the past 30 years, only 4 drugs have been made specifically for children, and hundreds have been made for adults. And I think that we could all agree that children would have better outcomes with drugs that are specifically made for their bodies. And the only way that we can do that is through dedicated research, and research that is made specifically for us as children. And yeah, that's what I want the public to know, that we're not adults and we have to be treated with drugs that are made for us as kids.
Thank you so much. You all have been wonderful, wonderful advocates, and I want to thank you for sharing your stories and being so brave, and for fighting for other kids like you and to make things better for the future. Ellen, do you have any final thoughts that you want to share before we sign off and let these kids get back to their Saturday?
Well, first of all, thank them. These kids are just amazing, and they just gave a glimpse as to what they go through. They're not talking about the psychosocial aspects that they go through. They briefly touched on, the pain that they have, the physical pain, let alone the mental pain. And they're all right. I mean, we have the possibility for treatments within our grasp. The challenge that we have is we need the funding. And this legislation, the Kids First 2.0, has the potential of funding without a sunset date for childhood cancer and disease research, and we so desperately need to pass that. So thank you to each and every one of you, but thank you, Congresswoman Waxton, for taking this up and being our champion.
Well, you're very welcome. I want to again thank you guys so much for sharing your stories and for being so brave and for fighting for others. You know, we do have an opportunity for transformational research in the area of kids cancer, and the time has come for it. And you guys have put a wonderful face on the issue and the problem. And now it's up to us as elected leaders to fix it, right? Because talk is cheap. We need to stop talking and start doing. So that's going to be my goal for the 117th Congress. And I thank you guys for having my back and for helping me in this fight. And thank you so much. Take care and stay safe, everybody.